This is Analog Spectrum. If we've learned one thing from this podcast is that it can't be that hard to start a podcast.
Hi everyone, this is Tony. As promised, here is the first chapter of my and Doug's joint Coast Guard Key West tale. I wanted to jump in here at the beginning to first tell you that yes, it will be in two parts. Second, and maybe more importantly, and as suggested in previous podcasts, it's pretty much unvarnished, candid, and unembellished. I personally don't think it's that big of a deal. Seriously, I've listened to it, and it's not even as crazy as I thought it would be. However, we all know the kind of world we live in today. So up front, if you're easily upset or you're just looking for a reason to be offended, you can go ahead and stop listening now. Otherwise, please enjoy the next installment of Two Quasi-Idiots in the Coast Guard. All right, this is Analog Spectrum. This is Tony speaking. I'm here with Doug.
Yes, sir.
How are we doing today, Doug?
Oh, doing good, man. Doing good.
Nice. And we are going to do another Coast Guard podcast.
We are.
You know, this is like I posted someplace. When you strike gold, you don't stop digging, man.
Think?
I think it is. Well, for one, and I mentioned this in the last podcast that we did about the Coast Guard. I could give a shit who's listening. I just like talking about this stuff. Right. I did not realize how much I like talking about it.
Okay.
And I think it's important, because
we're documenting historical events.
For us, it is definitely that.
Yes.
So I'm going to say something. Don't yell at me if I'm
yelling at you.
I think even Elizabeth is glad we're doing this. Your wife.
It could be. Yeah, she listens.
And not only that, I think she likes the fact that this is. I don't know how much of this stuff you've had conversations with her about.
So you just she likes the fact that you drag my ass out of the house for a couple hours every week.
I know there's that
so
too.
She gets the freedom, yeah. But no, yeah. So it's weird because I'm completely transparent with her. I don't, whatever. But
and I wouldn't expect anything less.
But I think when you and I start talking about, I'm sure this is going to happen during this podcast. You're going to say something that's going to spark a memory that I haven't thought about in a long time.
Right.
And I think that's what she's benefiting from is hearing that because I haven't told her those stories because I haven't thought about them. And then all of a sudden you'll say somebody's name or you'll remind me of an incident. I'm like, oh shit, I forgot all about that.
Had you told her the box kite story?
I don't know if I told her that one or not. I don't know.
I remember when you told me that shit and we're going to talk about Key West today. I remember when you told me that shit in Key West. I was laughing because
it's just that's how life was.
That dude ordered a guard dog and a missile.
Gary Starks.
Dude, that shit.
I don't know if I remembered his name when we told the story, but Gary Starks, that was his name.
Oh Lord!
Yeah. And he was also the kidnapper of the teddy bear. Yes. He was the kidnapper.
Oh. And later on, I didn't mention this when you told that story. I repeated that. I was stationed in Yorktown. I kidnapped somebody's shit.
Nice.
Based on that.
Nice.
It got out of hand. It really got out of hand.
Quick,
it did. Yeah. Well, I did it with another friend, and that guy was like, "Oh no, man, I'm going to blow that teddy bear's head right off." I was just like, and I thought we were going to get base security involved, but okay.
I just wish I still had the ransom note. This is the days before cell phones because if we had cell phones, man, we would have been taking pictures of that like crazy. But it was so craftily, funnily done with that stupid bear.
What an amazing thing!
Yeah, it was funny. Anyway.
Yeah. So, but now, so now we finally got to the point where Doug and I are stationed together.
In the Key West. Key West, the Devil's Island, as you call it. Yeah,
it is. And take it for what it's worth, but this was the point where our friendship started.
That's where it started. Yes, we met each other.
Exactly. And this has been kind of an important podcast for me because, a lot of times when we're just telling stories, it's just us bouncing stories off each other. But it's important for me. This is important for me because this not only is it where you and I became friends, but also lots of stuff happened in my life in Key West
during that period. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm sure there'll be things that I wish I would have talked about. I'm sure there's things that are important, but I just want to be as thorough as possible. And this is all about the documentation while still being entertaining and funny. Now, before we get started, there's a couple things I want to mention.
Okay.
I know you love it when I do this. A couple corrections, couple things like that. Last time in the last podcast, and only because now I've actually learned that a few people are actually listening to this, especially Coasties. I mentioned a friend who got orders to Kodiak, but threw a fit. Now I don't know if he didn't throw a fit. If you're listening, you didn't throw a fit. You just got you rightfully, if you're listening, got upset about the situation. I think in retrospect, he actually got orders to Cape May and then talked to the detailer and ended up in Kodiak. I think that's what he wanted. Okay. He actually wanted not to be on the East Coast, but the West Coast. So I got those flipped. No big deal. But before they email me, that's that. The other thing is the practical joke, and I'm going to be very honest here. The practical joke we played on those boot campers, that actually was, I told that story secondhand. Dave, if you're listening, that was your story. I know that was your story.
You story thief.
But again, it was just such a good story. I told it like that. That was Dave's story, but still, everything else about it was true.
All right. And
Keith Willis was the officer, and he did pass away.
Okay.
So he did pass away in 2009. He was actually the skipper of a 270. Ironically, when he passed away, and so God rest his soul, rest in peace. At the time, Ensign Willis, you were an awesome officer. And one of the stories, just real quick about the Harriet Lane that cracked me up about that guy. I'll keep it short. He was just a funny JO. Once again, OCS graduate, had a long history, family history in the Coast Guard. He was on the flying bridge with the captain while they were boarding a ship, and the sailboat was out there a certain distance, and the captain said, I remember because I was out there, and the skipper said something like, "Hey, what do you judge the distance to that sailboat to be?" And Ensign Willis says, "Oh shit, Captain, I don't know. I've never been that good at judging distances." And the skipper was like, "Well, you better get good."
Yeah. Good job.
Anyway, so all right, to the Keys. So a little background about Key West, so everybody kind of knows if you haven't been there. All right. Southernmost point in the United States. If you look it up, they say contiguous United States, being the 48. But I don't think Hawaii is further south than.
I can't remember, but I think it is. But I don't know. Yeah.
But in other places like Guam and all that kind of stuff are technically United States. But southernmost point in contiguous United States. It's the Key West is the most western key accessible by road. So current population right now is around 26,000.
Wow.
Yeah, and 4.2 square miles, 4 miles long, 1 mile wide, and a boatload of bars in that space. Okay.
T-shirt shops and bars.
Yep, and lots of military in Key West. Depending on how you count, there's like 4 or 5, maybe more military bases in Key West. Not counting the Coast Guard, because the Coast Guard is actually on a military base. Still there. Base, I actually recently visited Key West about a year ago, maybe a little less, with my wife and her family. Just drove in and drove back out. I was blown away by how much it hadn't changed and how much it had. You know what I mean? So it was. I went to buy my old apartment and everything like that. I was with my father-in-law and his wife, Melanie, stepmom, and so they're a little bit older, and our time was brief, so it wasn't like it was just a real quick in and out type thing. And
I just had an idea. Maybe you and I should go down there and do a podcast from Key West.
I would like that. I think we could do a vacation down there.
Take a trip. Yeah,
I would definitely go back. And and I went to the Coast Guard base down there, and it had changed. With the barracks was still there. Where my clinic was still there. The galley was still in the same place. But there was but there was also a building that I think was a reclaimed Navy base that had a big Coast Guard sign on it. It was weird. You know what I mean? That wasn't there when we were there. So definitely been down there since then, but haven't spent any real time.
Right.
It was funny because one of the people I work with was going down there, and he was like, "Hey, you used to be stationed in Key West. What's there to do in Key West?" And I was like, "Well, drink and snorkel and dive, and if you like golf, there's a little shitty 9-hole down there. There was at the time." And he was a little bit frustrated with the fact that he was like, "Well, that's it? You lived there for 3 years, 3.5 years, and you can't tell me more?" And I was kind of like, "Well, for one, I lived there in 1991, and two, No, that's all there is to do. That's all there is to do there. It's a little the beach.
Drink and water sports.
Yeah, and the beach sucks. Yeah. Okay, it's got a shitty because there is no sand down there. They bring in all the sand anyway. So I was there. I arrived in the spring or summer of '91. I left sometime in late '94. I got there a little bit before you came back, and I was a HS1. HS1. No, I was HS3.
HS3.
Right out of corps school. When I got to the clinic, I was one of 3 corpsmen. For a while there, we got down to 1 corpsman, that being me. So people transferred out. That was insane. And usually there was 2. So I was responsible for all the care of the Coasties there around the Keys, that going into Marathon and Alamorada, where there's 2 stations and some of the ships around there. And I lived in a duplex or quadruplex, I guess, rented by the Coast Guard with one other Coastie. So that was my existence for 3 years. So
there you go.
Yep.
Yeah, I got there, I want to say probably late summer, 91, something like that. Later, maybe even fall.
Right.
I was coming out of Hawaii and in a very dysfunctional relationship with my first wife. Her parents lived there. And I think I mentioned this the last one. I had a guy once tell me, like, hey, you're going to adopt your wife, take her back to where her parents are. And I didn't really actually do that on purpose. It just worked out that way because she was hounding the crap out of me to get stationed there. And I didn't want to go back. But I caved to whatever. It was Key West. It was land duty. So I was cool with that. But I was a first class cook at the time. And
nope, you were second.
Okay. I
was
second?
You were second class when you got there.
Was I?
Yeah, you made first while you were there. Sorry.
Okay, no. If you're right, you're right.
I'm pretty damn sure you were second when you arrived.
Because I came... Oh, you know what? I wasn't coming out of Hawaii. I was coming off of the Point Camden in L.A. That's correct. I was coming off... I forgot about that.
You left the unit out of this.
I did. Sorry. That's a fun unit. We'll talk about that some other time. Sorry, I forgot all about that. Yeah, because I was a second class on the Point Camden out of L.A. as independent duty. And then that's right. And because then I left, because I was thinking, like, how did I get shore duty to shore duty?
That's what I thought it was, because you were out Conus.
No. I ended up at the Point Camden. I forgot all about that boat. But
wow.
Yeah. But anyway, so off to Key West we go.
There's going to be an addendum to this podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah. So, I got there, and because I was married, I got off-base housing, and I lived on, was it Sigsbee? Sigsbee, yep. Whatever. What is that, 1950s housing or something?
It was.
So it was better than living on the barracks like I did first time around. But so I was second class cook in the galley and eventually promoted to first, and just kind of running the show over there.
I want to say you got there between 6 months and a year after I got there. I had been there for a bit when you arrived.
Could be. My timeline obviously is not super clear. Obvious statement.
No, seriously. How long were you on the Point Camden?
A couple of years. Yeah, it was a couple of years.
Dude, man.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Shit, man. All the shit blurs together.
Your brain is pickled or some shit.
It is. Yeah, it is.
So,
but no, I can't remember when I transferred off of that damn thing. But my personal life was shambles. You know what I mean? And
no. I totally know what you mean.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah,
I totally know what you mean.
I can't recall all this stuff, and it's really, to be honest, I know you go into the detail about like how big Key West is and when you got.
Yeah.
None of that stuff's important to me.
Honestly, the only reason I did that is for the listener.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. But because I looked it up, I didn't know that shit till just now. I went and looked it up because I wanted to
give people some perspective.
Exactly. I wanted this to be a little bit story-like, but I will tell you, as far as life being in shambles.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, because after I left Key West, and we're jumping around here, which is totally fine. Yeah. I totally get what you're saying, because I was married to my first wife at that time, and we were stationed in Virginia together, and I would totally describe my life in Virginia as shambles.
Yeah.
The words when you said that, I was like, fuck yeah. I get it, bro.
That was my Point Camden life, which actually kind of sucks because that was potentially a really cool unit. Yeah. We did some really cool stuff on that boat. I hated the CO. He was a Lieutenant JG that was just an asshole every which way. We all literally almost got in a fist fight, which we'll
He was the XO or CO?
CO. Yeah.
Wow.
CO. XO was a BM1.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, let's not get into that now.
Yeah, so.
Stick with the Key West stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So working in the galley, you and I lived through the whole Cuban not missile crisis, the Haitian
the whole
immigration,
AMIO, Alien Migration something.
That whole
operations.
Thing.
Yeah.
That was a lot. But
Alien Migration Interdiction Ops.
Yep.
AMIO. Yep.
But yeah, there's just a lot of stuff that happened down there, and when I was not ready for that, I think that was the first time that I had been to Key West and I was actually an adult, because I grew up in Florida and then we used to go down there and snorkel and stuff, and then when I went to Key West as my first unit, shit, man, I was barely 18.
Yeah,
I was there not even a year, I don't think, or somewhere around a year before I went to A school. So by the time I got back, I was actually a young adult, but still I was, an adult, and I wasn't quite ready for the chaos that ensued.
Yeah.
So
no, and that's both personal and and just the stuff. So, like I've kind of already alluded to, there's Key West is, and they probably put things in place to keep people from doing dumb shit.
Potentially,
maybe, and a lot of the chaos that was in my workplace. So some of it, a good percentage of it, came out of the galley. Your cooks were definitely an interesting group, but not all of it. But we'll get into that a little bit. But there was just, when you take young people, 18, 19, 20, 21, put them someplace where there's not a whole lot to do but drink, and fuck, they do a lot of that. Yep. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And more often than not, completely irresponsibly. Yeah. When I first got there, I mean, the job I had, like I said, it's not that exciting clearly, but we just provided medical care, and that was, we there was me and HS1 Kyle, if you're listening. He was amazing. He was a great guy, and one of the things about it was he was probably like, one of the first times I ever had a relationship with somebody that was what I would refer to as almost like a bridge to adulthood. Like I look at my father,
like a mentor kind of thing. Yeah,
like my father and all that kind of stuff. Like he
made me think about the guys that I was working with and then what influence they had. Yikes.
Yeah, he had lived life. He had a freaking really sharp sense of humor. Mm-hmm. I saw how he was very, and I mean this with all the, very positively. He was very political, so he knew how to get, like I said in my previous podcast, our previous Coast Guard podcast, that I think he was the reason I was there. He had made phone calls and he talked to the XO and said that, hey, we're doing this, a lot of this alien migration thing. We need another corpsman, and even though we weren't billeted for it, I ended up down there. So I may have him to thank for this. And I learned a lot about how to network and be political, at least hit the foundational stuff of that from him. There was also Charlie was down there at the time, totally different person. My first experience with Charlie was Kyle told me this story about how they had a drug safe, and in that drug safe they had amyl nitrate, which is like poppers, and that, you can use that as a medication for people that have chest pain. Like I don't know if they use it anymore, but I don't think they do. I teach cardiology, I should know that. But you can, just like nitroglycerin, it's a vasodilator, and it had expired, and Kyle had given it to Charlie to dispose of because it had expired, and he put it in the sink in the pharmacy and busted it all with a hammer. So basically, he killed half. Oh yeah, basically eviscerated all his brain cells.
Jesus.
And that was Charlie. So there was that, but there was just all this kind of stuff that was suddenly I had to be an adult, And that was Key West, for me, being an adult, and it's probably one of the hardest places to be an adult.
Yeah, no, it's definitely caters to the irresponsible.
It really does.
Yeah, I remember. When I first got there was a chief in charge of the galley, a senior chief in charge of the galley, and he was an older guy. I don't remember his name. I want to say Smith, to be honest. I could be wrong on that.
Right.
But he was about ready to retire. One of these dudes, he's coasting. He had the galley set up and running pretty well. And it was kind of on autopilot almost for him. He didn't do much.
Right.
And then below him was a first class named Greg.
I remember Greg.
Yep. And he was, when I first got there, he was one of these deceptive kind of people. Mm-hmm. He was really cool and everything was great. And I was totally trusting, I trusted in the military system and all that sort of stuff. And I was a second class, and I had, I want to say 4 third classes working for me at the time. We might have been shorthanded if I can't always quite remember. But then there was, we didn't use the local non-rates as mess cooks. We had civilian mess cooks, which I'm sure today we'll talk about those.
Yes. We're going to talk about all that in the podcast.
Yeah. So, one of those was Louis, and I'm just going to leave that there, and we'll come back to Louis.
We'll circle back around to Louis.
Yeah, but these civilians were hired out of the local community, and Louis was a Cuban guy who lived locally, and which there was a lot of those down there, a lot of Cubans, which, man, I mean, I learned to love their culture. I really did. But anyway, yeah, so as time started to tick away, as I started to get familiar down there, I was balancing this damn. I was kind of learning a new job because I was moving my way to first class, but I was learning leadership and stuff like that professionally. I pretty much knew how to cook. I knew the ins and outs of the job from the standpoint of being a worker, but I was moving into a leadership role, and I was trying to learn some of that stuff. And then at the same time, my home life was freaking disastrous, And so it was, it was challenging. It was challenging and trying to balance a bunch of stuff and trying to figure it out. I was still a kid anyways, really, young.
Right.
What were we there? Probably 24 or something?
I was probably, I joined when I was 21. I turned 22 in boot camp. I'd probably say I was 23, 24 at that time.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, 25 maybe I was. But,
yeah. And like I said, there's like about a 6-month period, maybe. I don't know. Shit. But when I was there, and you hadn't shown up yet.
Right.
And it was, like I said, there was like just kind of staying in chronological order. I knew that at the time I joined, and I was kind of like, this is not going to be a life thing for me. You know what I mean? I'm not going to. It's going to do 4 years. I'm out. Right.
Yep.
And I had no idea what I was going to do when I got out, but I already started kind of thinking I was going to, I wanted to be a PA, our stay in patient care, and I was really warming up to patient care. My job involved mostly just kind of doing administrative stuff and getting people to the Navy base for medical care, getting them to Orlando. Right. At the time there was Homestead. Homestead is no longer Air Force Base because Andrew
wiped it out. Hurricane Andrew.
And we'll talk about that. Yeah, not your son. But and also there was ships in Key West. Clearly, there was 2 270s, the Thetis and Laguerre. Did we say?
Yeah, I think so.
Yep. And then there was the 3 SESs. Yeah. And that was the Shearwater, Seahawk, and Petrel. Yeah. There was a 110. There's 2 110s, and I can only remember the name of one of them. Yeah, the Sickenack, and there was one other, and I cannot remember the name of it.
If anybody's listening and just shoot that to us.
Earlier I was thinking it might have been the Vashon, but I can't. But Doug says
that doesn't sound familiar to me. Yeah.
And the Coast Guard does a terrible job of like maintaining history of their cutters.
Right. Like at least making it public anyways.
Yeah, I Googled that crap, and also 110s have a tendency to move around. Ships have a tendency to move around, right? That's because they float. And so I remember I started because I was a corpsman and I was an EMT, and it was funny because I was an EMT and the station had EMTs, and somehow because I was a corpsman, my EMT was better than their EMT ability, which is total bullshit. Okay, I had no more medical capabilities in there. Probably they had more because they did more of that emergency medicine crap, right? But every time they were like, hey, we're going to go out on a search and rescue and this could be bad, but we don't know for sure if it's bad. We're just kind of assuming that it's bad. We want you to go with us. And it could be on one of the small cutters. That happened a few times, or it could be like on the small boat station, or on the small boat, like the
41
at the time. And so I remember one time, they made us carry a beeper, right?
Yeah, remember that? This is before cell phones, people.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, and I don't know why, and this is, even to this day, I'd always, that beeper would go off and I'd be like, fuck, but that was the best part of the job.
Yeah.
It was. When I had to go in and do something, that was the best part of the job. And I was always like, oh man, but I'm so busy freaking eating pasta and watching some bullshit movie. But so they call me up and and they're like, hey, we need to go. We need you to join us. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I was like, oh shit. So I go meet the station, and I get on the boat, and we start heading out, right? And I remember it's pitch black, and the boat's heading out, and I'm a young kid. I don't know what questions to ask or what to do. I got the freaking EMT kit up by the coxswain, and I'm listening to the radio. And I remember the name of the radio man, but I'm not going to say her name. But I had talked to her before in the past, and I was never like super impressed with her at the time. But I guess there had been a person on this boat that had been assaulted, like she had been beaten up, right? And beaten up so badly that they needed to go get him, right? And as anybody knows, that these boats typically will be crewed by one nationality. The ship is is registered in another country, and it sails between other countries. So this one had been like registered through French Guiana. The whole crew was Korean, and they were a tanker of some sort, right? Right. And so off we go, and she's stuck. And again, this is not meant to be racist, okay? I promise. But she's talking to this boat, and she says, "Can you give me the status of the injured individual?" And you hear over and you hear like and total Korean, right? Right. And there's like a very brief pause, right? Like not that they needed a translator. She goes, I understand. He is currently conscious but not breathing. And I'm like, two things are going through my mind. How the fuck does she know?
She know Korean. Does
she know Korean? And two, not breathing? You know what I mean? I'm thinking, oh, so I'm a little freaked out, right? So we get all the way out there, and they're like, okay, we're on scene. And I'm thinking, I don't see shit. And all of a sudden, all the lights come on, and there's this freaking massive ship. And all of a sudden the Jacob's ladder comes over, is rickety ass Jacob's ladder. And I got the radio, and I'm walking, and I'm talking to another radio man. And I'm going through this, and I climb up this rickety ass Jacob's ladder, get up on this boat. It's just like something out of freaking Waterworld, right? It's just so rusted and just every surface.
Okay, for the information of listeners, that describes almost all boardings that you do.
Oh yeah.
With the exception of sailboats, usually sailboats are most of them are relatively nice. Yeah. Pleasure boats for fishing, but if you go boarding any kind of tankers or any kind of commercial fishing vessels, industrial.
They're filthy.
It's not nice.
It's not. Yeah. So I'm walking this thing on the ship, and I'm a little freaking. I'm freaking out. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh crap. And so I'm on the radio, and the guy's saying, "Okay, Doc. They call you Doc. I'm not a doctor, but they call you Doc. Okay, Doc. If you need anything, you just tell us what you need. Okay, and we'll make it happen. Okay. So I finally, so I get to the mess deck where they got this guy, and just real quick, the history is that he's a skipper. He was beat up by one of his crew members. Okay, a crew member beat him up. Okay, and beat him up with there was this old thing you buy like on TV. It's called the bull worker. It was this two handlebars on a big thick spring that you bent to like work on your upper body. Chest, yeah, exactly. And this guy beat him up, and there was a story to that, but I don't want to take forever. But he got his ass kicked by another crew member. And I get on the mess deck, and there he is laying on the table, and he is like fucked up. I mean, he is like totally beat to shit. Okay, he is barely alive. And so like immediately, before I even look at him, and again, would have been different now. I'm a different person. Right. I'm a trained medical provider, but I am. But I grabbed that freaking radio, and I'm thinking, I'm going to need a helicopter like right now. I'm going to need you to I need to contact the air station to send a helicopter. And they're like, no, Doc, don't get too, get ahead of yourself. Don't get too ahead of yourself there, Doc. No, seriously, I need a helicopter. And so they're like, okay. And so they start, and the conversation went on, but, so I start packaging this guy, and getting him all prepared. And take him out to the fantail of this. Put him in a Stokes, right? And I take him out to the fantail, and I'm just like, I just need to get this guy away from me, because I'm terrified. Right? He's gonna die. Something's gonna happen. This is close, right? So I'm sitting there, and I'm waiting. I'm like, where the hell is that helicopter? and just about the point I'm about ready to lose hope, right? It's like that so fast. This man, the helicopter goes buzzing over, man, and so fast, man. This thing just freaking banks, and I can see it, and it freaking pulls back and does this like amazing air move and just slides right,
Coast Guard commercial,
slides right over the top. I look up, see that USCG printed across the bottom of that helicopter. They freaking chuck the ball out, and down comes in the boat, and whoever was with me goes, don't touch the ball, because it'll blast you.
Yeah, you will get
static electricity. Don't touch the ball. Ball hits the desk, kang, and I hook that thing on, and boom, the stoke slitter goes up, and gone. Like a minute.
Yeah.
Like a minute, and it was such a rush, man. It was such a rush, and. I was like, oh God, I'm in for the 20.
That's it.
I'm in.
Sold.
I'm sold. and that was the best thing that ever happened. Anyway, we ended up going back in. We actually brought the guy who beat him up back in. We arrested him. Yeah. None of them spoke English, Right. And that was it. And there was a couple other ones I had that were similar to that. That was the most intense one. I got back the next day and I was just freaking smiling like crazy.
Right.
I was like, "What happened last night?" And I was like, "Oh my God, you wouldn't believe it." Wrote it all up. That's why people join the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
That's why.
That's exactly why.
Yeah. Not raking leaves in front of the officers club. You do it for the search and rescue was always great. I didn't even do that much. I remember I had one time where. They say, hey, a guy's got some steel stuck in his eye, and my thing with the steel was always like a little fleb of like a metal shaving. When I got and seen the guy actually had like a hunk of rebar sticking out of his head. I was like, that's pretty cool. And brought that guy in. Yeah,
it's funny. I missed the Point Camden part of my career, but I actually I did some cool SAR stuff on there. I watched a plane crash in LA Harbor and responded to that. Can you believe we literally watched this plane crash? And by the time we got there, which was not far, it couldn't have been more than 5 miles.
Right.
And we were hauling ass. By the time we got there, we were already second on scene.
Oh, yeah.
Like, God dang it, though, I don't know. It was like the sheriff had a boat out or something. Yeah. And they beat us to it. And like, you sons of bitches. And of course, they rescued the guys and dragging them out. And we had to stand watch over this stupid floating plane for 6 hours until they could get the sea tugs out there to take care of it. But
one of the last, and just kind of maybe wrapping all the search and rescue into one thing. One of the last ones I ever did was similar. Because again, we did a lot of alien migration stuff, and there was a group of Cubans that had stolen a ship in Cuba, and they had gotten that thing a little bit outside Cuba, and the Cuban government sent some gunboats out and just shot the piss out of it with people on board, and that was the time when I think I went out with the Sickenac. Sickenac was like, hey, we might want to have a dock on board, and so when I got on scene, talking about there was already like when we got to the dredge, it was a dredge. There was like 382. I think it was 82 and a couple 110s and a bunch of helicopters. And we were airlifting people and the helicopters were just pulling people off like crazy,
as quick as they could.
Yeah. And I remember like there was this moment, like there was just so much activity and so much intensity, and we were just packaging people and shooting them up to the helicopters as fast as we could. And then all of a sudden, boom. Everybody was gone.
All quiet, yeah.
Everything was gone. Yeah, everything was gone. And the only ship that was still on scene, which was a ship that I did not ride out. It was me on the boat with maybe one other Coastie, and there was an 82-footer that was out there, and the 82-footer brought me back to Key West.
Nice.
It was crazy. And then I rode the Petrel one time out on a search and rescue, but it wasn't. They were told me that there was a lot of casualties, and when I rode it out, the person had died. Out of I don't know.
Heart attack or whatever.
Something like that, like tuberculosis. Who the fuck? And so when I got there, it was no big deal. But I didn't. The funny thing about the Petrel was I went out. The CO was gone at the time, and I rode out with the XO. And he was also QM senior chief, and he was a guy that probably had been like QM senior chief, master chief, like one of these guys that got in all kinds of trouble. Yeah. He definitely so old Coast Guard crazy.
Right.
And I had no respect for that guy, had no respect at all. And then when I watched him skipper that boat, I was like, no, he's freaking
mad skills.
He's got mad skills, man. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Some of those guys were like that. I knew some guys like that too that were the mechanic in particular on my first ship. No respect for that guy at all. His demeanor and all of that stuff. But when the engine broke, that's the guy they called. Yeah. And he fixed it.
Yeah. I will say honestly, that's like I said before that because I was young too. He was old. That's probably one of the reasons I was like. But after that, I was like, no, he's freaking. Yeah. He's the shit, man. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So there was some good stuff that we did down there. I mean, the whole thing about rescuing the migrants and stuff. So if anybody doesn't know, Castro was still in charge, and he opened up the borders and said, if people want to leave, they can leave. He provided them no way to leave, wouldn't let us actually come and, as the United States, come and actually transport people off. But that was right after he I think he opened up for the prisoners and stuff first, right? He was letting prisoners blast off if they wanted to blast off, but they kind of had to find their own way, and they were doing stuff like stealing boats and handcrafted rafts to try to float 90 miles across the open sea to try to hit Key West.
Yeah, there was actually this may have happened when you were down there. I never saw it, but there was at the station, either the station or at the Ant, they had a fucking blender, I think, where they had taken a blender and fashioned an outboard motor.
No, I didn't see that.
Oh yeah, it's either a blender or some sort of like weird household appliance. And so they had actually made it. And honestly, Cubans resourcely as shit.
Well,
right?
yeah.
And I don't want to get too political about all this, right. But I've actually had friends ask me why would like South Florida swing so hard in a conservative way or into a Republican way. Yeah, they were in Cuba. You know what I mean?
They were in the heart of communism.
Yeah, the heart of communism, socialism.
Yeah, they know what it.
So now, politically, they swung completely the opposite way.
We don't want to do that again.
Yeah, they swung the opposite way. They're all about capitalism. Look at Scarface, right?
Yeah.
Not that that's a fantasy, but Jimmy Carter. Yeah. All the way up to the 90s. And Cubans out like crazy.
Nah, like crazy. In my job during all of this. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I want to say the number that I remember, we got an award for that. And I want to say the number that I remember is 95 or 96,000 people in 3 months.
Yeah.
Something like that. So to give you some, that's almost 100,000 people in 3 months, which of course is 30,000 people a month.
Right.
Which is 1,000 people a day.
Yeah, I wasn't real proud of myself during that time. There was one time I remember J.O. was trying to be nice to me, but there was like a Cuban that had something wrong with him, and I was just like, I don't give a shit. And he was like, well, do you want to look at him? I'm like, I do not. You know what I mean? Now, of course, in hindsight, I should have looked at him. You know what I mean? I should have looked at him. But I was like,
I was always the other way. I really did. I defaulted in those circumstances. I almost always defaulted to the compassion side.
Good for you.
I mean that. Yeah, no, and it's not. I'm not tooting my own horn here, but it's just that I think that I chose my profession for that very reason. Because I like the social aspect of being a cook, and I like the providing aspect. Like I like making food, and other people go, "Fuck, this is good." I get enjoyment out of that. So. They would, same with you, they'd call me up and they'd beep me sometime in the middle of the night, and I'd go, shit, here we go. And I have to go into the galley and fire up the ovens and make beans and rice.
Yeah.
And feed, I would just get the word, there's 200 Cubans coming in, or there's 150 Cubans. So we'd have to go up and all we could give them was beans and rice. And you have a story around why that's the case, right? I mean, because you think, oh man, we have all these leftovers. We had fried fish for dinner tonight, and we got all this leftover stuff and steak or whatever. We could feed them all that good food. They get sicker than crap, man, because they have their diet has been so restricted for so long.
Right.
That's all they can really actually ingest without really getting ill. And so there's been cooks that have done it, give them either spicy food like your story or rich food or whatever, and they just get sicker than shit, man.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, that was on later. That was on the Escape. Most of our stuff was Cubans, but we also had Haitians.
Yeah, there were Cubans and Haitians.
But also, for those that don't know, Cuba's only 90 miles from Key West.
Yeah. So, and I just think sometimes, and it occurred to me back then, it really did. And maybe this was the influence that I had from guys like Louis. I were working with them because he escaped Cuba, Yeah. And a lot of the folks that worked over there, Mama, remember her, the little short.
Oh my God, I haven't thought about her in years.
Yeah. So I don't even know what her real name was. Everybody called her Mama.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, so I was sort of on a everyday friendship, working type relationship with those folks. So I had real compassion. And if you think about it, I mean, these people were so desperate. They literally took their families in a rickety ass, barely floating vessel with no propulsion, and they tried to either learn how to sail along the way or try to row 90 miles across the ocean. Now, granted, it's not super rough seas, it's not like you're in the North Atlantic, but still.
It's not. I mean, again, you're right. It's not the in between, Argentina and South Pole.
But you're not busting 20-footers or nothing, but still, it's not safe.
Oh, there's jellyfish and shit. It's not, you don't want to be in the water. There's jellyfish that'll sting. They'll kill you. You know, and sharks.
Yeah.
Oh, it's and no navigation. In other words, navigation. I mean. You got the sunrise and the sun setting. They were, I'm sure there may have been compasses, but like crackerjack shit, right?
Yep.
And
you're just imagine just taking your whole family.
Would you do it?
Stick them in a little John boat that barely floats, and
ask yourself how bad does life have to be for you to decide to do that shit?
Exactly.
And they did, and by the
thousands
and thousands,
so
tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe, I don't know, a lot.
That was a lot, but that was, I mean, again, I never really minded. I mean, it was inconvenience, when I get the beeper and whatever. But I always like, there was always that side of me that was like, if I was in their shoes, I would sure appreciate somebody giving me some beans and rice.
I would probably say maybe my reaction about my negativity towards that, and well, again, I think a big chunk of it was my age, But the other thing was, I also thought that I could have handled it different. A lot of, and by the way, I never did anything like I didn't hurt anybody or kill anybody or anything like that. But I did resent it, and I think sometimes I did. And I think part of it also was that the people down there had this kind of unrealistic, just like what I talked about with the search and rescue, had this unrealistic expectation of what I was capable of. Right? Like I remember there was this one woman, God, that had like shorts on, and she had like sat on like an inner tube or something with burlap, and it just like peeled all the skin off her legs, right? And all the way up almost into her crotch, right? And Jesus, just get her to the goddamn hospital. Right. I mean, what am I going to do for her?
Yeah,
right?
rub Vaseline on it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, just get her to the hospital. But they're like, well, call the corpsman. And it's like, look, I got this little clinic. It was just uncomfortable for me because I felt like it really pushed me outside my comfort zone, right?
Well, I was going to say that's probably a big part of it is you were asked to do a lot more than I would. I mean, all I had to do was go in and cook and feed people and, at inconvenient times. But, there was a lot more demand put on you for that. So
right. And I felt like and again, nowadays I would just be like, I can't, I work in clinics now where I'm kind of like, I can't help you. And, and I'm very comfortable with saying, or reasonably comfortable with saying,
you have to go to hospital.
You got to go to the hospital, But at the time my still developing, mumble bumble brain of a young man, But like you were saying, there was just a lot of the things with the Cubans. That was a big part of it. So yeah.
But so outside of that, I think we sure had some interesting characters down there.
We did.
And most of them work for me.
So the galley is central to this, but. You worked at the galley, but I spent a lot of time at the galley, and a lot of that was kind of based on the fact that you and I, I don't even know, I can't even think back to how our friendship kind of became what it was.
How it developed, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just feel like...
Well, because we were only two sane people, maybe?
I don't know. I think once I met you, and maybe this is mutual, I was just like, I like this dude. This is a guy that obviously I just know... that we're similar in a lot of ways, and we were about the same age, and I don't even know if this may not even translate to something that is even going to be funny, but I remember we would always have TAD people working at the clinic.
Right.
And
so it's temporarily assigned people.
Yeah, temporarily assigned that were either going to school or whatever, and I had this fireman or seaman or whatever working there, and a female, and she had gotten pregnant, so she couldn't be on the boat anymore. And she was in her first trimester. And I remember one time, do you remember this? You know what I'm about ready to tell?
No, go tell me.
Okay, so and she'd eaten a Snickers bar or something like that.
Oh yeah.
so you were walking in one door, and she was down a hallway where I couldn't see her. But I was so it was kind of like this L, and so you're coming in, you can see her, I can't see her, down a hallway that's kind of shaped perpendicular to the hall, and I guess she's like just puking in the hallway, and you come walking in, you're just kind of like bebop, and you're kind of like and all of a sudden you go, hey, and you look down the hallway and you see her vomit and you go, hey, that's sick as shit.
Yeah, well,
and but you do, you go, hey, that's sick as shit. What's going on, man? And like literally, you don't even, you just kind of acknowledge the fact that she's like spraying vomit all over the hall.
I'm pretty sure she was throwing up in a trash can.
No, she wasn't.
No?
I remember that she threw up in the hallway.
Oh,
like
okay.
she had to clean up her own vomit.
Okay.
But your whole thing was like you acknowledged it, but it wasn't gonna it wasn't gonna change why you came to the clinic. It wasn't gonna change the conversation. You didn't even blink. And I just thought, God, that's fucking funny as shit. So you're like, hey, that's sick as shit. Anyway, Tony, what do you think about?
By the way,
I might be cruising over tonight so we can play video games.
What do you think of these socks? Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, so that was kind of the
vibe.
The focus. That's where everything kind of started.
Right.
And then so I started going over the galley, and just to kind of a little bit more things to develop. I also got involved in like. This is like basically like, hey, I feel like I light myself on fire, but I got involved in getting people counseling for like drugs and alcohol, and I dragged Doug into that.
Yeah.
So we really ended up
this I remember well. This I remember. I used to have so Tony and I don't know exactly where it all first started, but we used to have to see each other on a regular basis because the corpsman would have to inspect the galley.
Okay.
Right, for cleanliness and safety standards and all that stuff.
Right, cleanliness for sure.
Yeah. So my job, I was responsible for making sure all that stuff got done. So I had to make sure all my cooks kept thermometers where they were supposed to be, and didn't thaw out raw chicken on the floor, whatever, stuff like that. And so all the leftovers had the correct dates and stuff. So Tony would come over frequently and do that. So anyway, he's coming over, and we had known each other for a little while at this point. And he comes over and he's like, hey, I'm going to do galley inspection. I mean, okay, cool. I'm ready. Like, I tried to stay ready. And he's like, oh yeah, and by the way, what do you think about being a CEDAR? I'm like, I don't know. What is it? I thought he was talking about LARPing or something. Right. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about.
Command Drug and Alcohol Rep.
Yeah, so he explained to me it's basically when somebody has an issue that's in the service and they have an issue that surrounds drugs or alcohol, kind of the first point of contact, right? And if they've been arrested or something like that, they come to us, and then we kind of evaluate the situation and then recommend to the command some kind of a course of action.
Right.
Like, this guy is totally jacked up, or all right, he was 18 years old, he's stupid, first time he's ever been away from home, whatever that is.
Exactly. You refer them to a doctor or medical provider who is skilled at making that diagnosis. So we were basically more facilitators.
Yes,
and so the doctor would make PA or whatever would say, no big deal.
Yep.
Just abusive or addicted.
Right.
And that was basically the three things.
But we were actually, like, again, we're just representatives. That was in the name. So we were representing the command. Most of the time the people went to the Navy base.
Yes.
So we were representing the command to the Navy base, and then we were representing the command to the individual, saying like, hey, these are the rules, right? This is what the Coast Guard does in this situation. So we explain the rules to them. And then we would also represent that person back to the command or whoever their boss is.
And we arrange treatment.
Yeah. And so, anyway, in my very cavalier attitude, I'm like, yeah, sure, dude, I'll do it, whatever. Right. I had no clue, like you said, if I would have known I was going to light myself on fire, I'm not sure I would have said yes to that.
What did your father tell you about training?
Yeah, he said it. I told you I only turned down one. My dad told me, take every training they'll give you, and EMT is the only thing I turned down. But I agreed to that thanks to Tony. And,
I got suckered into it too.
Yeah. But I tell you what, and I'm glad that we did it together, because there was a element of laughing behind the scenes at these crazy ass idiots that I don't think you would have had without me, and I wouldn't have had without you.
It was like when Kyle left, he ended up getting orders. I ended up falling into that role.
Right.
Like I said, a dozen times, knowing now about all that stuff, it all makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, I was
Yeah.
Just
and way over your head.
Way over my head.
Yeah.
And so.
But okay, so let's get down to. We've been dancing around this for a while. Let's get down to the nitty gritty here. So
okay.
I had some folks working for me, and Tony's got more stories than I do because he dealt with these people from all over the base. More than I did. It was pretty much his main responsibility. For me, it was kind of like a collateral type of job. Anyway, so I had people working for me that were brand new into the Coast Guard, just out of their A school, and they were young and they were stupid. Most of them were the first time they were away from home, first time they had a real job that was paying them money, and they had responsibilities and so on. And so, of course, being in an atmosphere like Key West, they drank. They drank a lot. They did drugs. They did stupid shit. They made bad decisions. And so some of it turned out to be pretty funny.
Yeah.
I had a girl working for me, black girl. I just loved her to death, man. I thought she was so fun. She was a great cook. She followed my instructions for the most part. But she was batshit crazy.
Yeah. I remember her.
She was, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but a sex addict maybe. Would that be a fair assessment?
Dude, I am not even going to wade into that, man.
Okay. So she would come in the morning, right? And she's busy, like, stirring the eggs or whatever she's doing, making bacon or something. And I can't even remember her name, sadly. I wish I could. But I would come in the morning and you know, just walk in, making my rounds, checking on things. Hey, how's it going? I met this boy last night, and we got in the shower, and that water just does stuff to you. It's just like, holy shit, man, I don't want to hear this, you know. And then she would go on. I'm tired, like different guys all the time and whatever. And that turned into kind of a ongoing. I don't know what you would call it, voyeuristic, you know, just from I don't know, it was crazy, man.
And you're like, well, I watched Gunsmoke.
Yeah.
It was the episode where Festus fell down a well.
Yeah, we've been watching Beavis and Butthead.
Oh, dude, Beavis and Butthead came out while we were. No, they didn't. No,
I think it was after.
Yeah, it was after.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about people, because we could ramble forever. Let's talk about people. Let's talk about. I don't remember his name, but the tall kid that was.
Okay, that's where I was going next. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah.
And If you're easily offended or you just don't want us to talk about people, we will not give names or anything like that. But I remember that kid. And I will tell right now with Doug, you can hate on me if you want. You're one of the good ones, man. Like when it came to cooks, but cooks attracted a certain personality type.
Yeah. No
they
doubt.
just did, man.
Yeah.
And also I think, and you can hate on me if you want. This sounds very discriminatory, but I think a lot of times people are like, "Hey, you know, I don't want to be a non-rate on a ship." You know, the SS rate was always kind of
the school moves quick.
Yeah, it moves quick.
Yeah.
So if I want a job, but I think a lot of times people don't think of the long term. That's the they're kind of like, you're going to be underway. This is going to happen.
Yeah.
And so even though there's a lot of great cooks, there was a lot. They were just kind of like, they were just looking for that fast track.
Easy out.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so this kid, I don't remember his name. And he kind of came later. These are a little bit out of sync, but because there was like maybe, and you talked about the Greg and that guy. Oh my gosh!
Oh yeah, we'll get to Greg in a minute.
But I remember at the time, and I haven't mentioned this individual yet, but the other corpsman that came after, well, he overlapped a little bit. Maybe he didn't. I don't know. There was a period when I was there by myself. But Dwayne was the other corpsman I was with. He was a great guy.
That guy was funny as hell, man.
He was awesome. So Dwayne, if you're listening, I love you like a brother, man. I swear. And I wish I'd love to see you again. And anyway, and he did know more. He had been a corpsman a little longer than I have. And he had taught me things like, hey, you know, take suicide. And this sounds terrible. Take suicide seriously. Things like that. Like if they say they're going to kill themselves, you don't fuck around with that. That's remember his like. And so this kid, he had gone down there, and for one, he was just. I don't even know. Had really bad acne. There was times where we were like, we got to take him off the line because you can't have a kid with acne like that cooking for people.
We're talking like he's cooking food for the entire base, and he's literally got pussy sores on his face.
And they're like, no. Yeah. And So he'd been down there like a moment, like a minute, like a second, right? And he's down on Duval Street, which is the main drag in Key West, right?
That's where all the mayhem happens.
And there's a woman, and she's from India, and she's probably
now this kid was 17 years old.
He was just a baby.
Yeah,
he's just a baby.
Yeah, I think he might have turned 18 right after he arrived.
Yeah. He was, and like I don't think he went right from boot camp to course to
A school,
to A school, right? And in Petaluma, and so this woman, I want to say she was like
40, 45?
Maybe like 68. I don't know.
She wasn't that old. She wasn't that
old. But he freaking married her.
He married her.
She sold beads on a blanket on Duval Street, okay?
And they knew each other for a week, maybe?
Something like that. But I got to tell you what, I know what everybody's probably, I don't know. In today's world, maybe what you're imagining.
Don't be so sensitive.
No, but she was smart. She actually knew. Yeah, she freaking nailed this kid, right?
I would venture to say she was probably homeless. That would be my guess.
Yeah, and she marries this kid. And then, like, basically, like, runs rough. I mean, smart, but not a good person.
Yeah.
Like, she runs roughshod of this kid. I don't even know how it transpires, but he ends up, like, getting kicked out of his housing. And
let's back up 1 second. So the reason that she would marry this kid is for all the benefits that the military provides, right?
Cinderella Liberty.
Yeah, Cinderella Liberty. So it's good for him because he gets to move out of the barracks on base and to off-base housing.
Right.
And clearly it's good for her because whatever not good situation she was in.
And
she
clearly
he
loved her.
Yeah.
He loved her so much.
Well, ask him. They'll tell you that.
Oh, God.
So he comes to me one day and, oh, God.
And by the way, he put the chit in, let's be clear, to get married.
Yeah, he did put the chit in to get married, which I had to sign, whatever.
Whatever.
I try not to judge people's life choices, Tony. Anyway, so he comes to me one day and he says, yeah, I need to go to the corpsman. And I said, what for?
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah, I said, what for? He says, I'm suicidal. I went, what? He's like, yeah. He might have not shown up for work or something. I don't remember how it developed. Oh, yeah. But anyway, he says, yeah, I tried to kill myself. And he had been married not even a month, I think. Right. Whatever. It was a really short period of time. And I said, what? And of course, I'm thinking in the back of my head, okay, let's drag this guy over to Tony. And he's like, yeah, I jumped off the dresser last night.
No, that's right. I remember that. No, I thought you were talking about somebody different. That guy.
And I said, what? He goes, yeah, I jumped off the dresser. I'm like, fuck, you're going to kill yourself jumping off a dresser? The guy's like 9 feet tall anyway. Probably bumped his head on the way down.
That's what he was trying to do, was jump off and hit his head on the furniture.
Oh, Jesus, yeah. So anyway, I dragged him over to Tony and then turned it over from there.
Yeah, so he did that. But he also, and I know people are going to think I'm fucking kidding about this.
All these stories are true.
These are true.
Yep.
He tried to cut his wrist with a spork.
With a spork, yep.
That's the goddamn truth. Yep. He tried to cut his wrist with a spork. That's the thing that you eat the mashed potatoes with at freaking KFC, half spoon, half fork. Yeah. That guy tried to scratch his wrist open. Okay, so I remember like me and Dwayne interviewing him, and I was in there, and this is the whole suicide seriously thing. Dwayne was like, "I'm going to ask you, are you suicidal? Would you, if I left you to your own devices, would you kill yourself?" And he goes, can you tell me that you wouldn't? And I remember him and he goes like, I don't know. I think I'd kill myself. I remember like Dwayne like turning around and looking at me, and he didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes was like, yeah, well, fuck this guy. That was the look in his eyes. He was literally like, fuck. And so he makes some phone calls, man. We hauled this kid away. Yep. Hauled this kid away. Yep. And then I remember him calling me from the I forget the name of there was a mental health hospital in Key West. It was just kind of plugged in the middle of like
little shoddy little thing.
Yeah, exactly. And like 3 or 4 stories. I remember him like calling me from this place saying, they took away my belt and shoelaces, and they're like, yeah, they do that, so
what do you expect?
Yeah, but that guy was a quick turnaround. I mean, he was in for like a minute, and then we discharged him,
booted him.
Yeah. Well, that's nothing too about the military and the Coast Guard. Any of these services, they'll tell you like once you're in for good. But the truth of the matter is if you want out, you can get out.
Yeah, and you just got to be willing to pay that consequence because it's not free.
It's not.
Because that guy now for the rest of his life has a DD-214 that says he got a boot for mental.
Yeah, other than honorable. Yeah. So,
but there's re-enlistment codes on there, and often,
he's not.
Yeah, not rehirable.
No, and there was him, and that's actually one of the briefer stories about the galley crew. But I just remember that whole thing with the spork. I was just like, oh my god, and to tell you that. One, because he's going for sympathy. Yeah. And the dresser jumping up there. I remember that too. Yeah. And like you want me to take you seriously. Yeah.
You know, you jumped off a dresser.
And like I said, I keep going back to this. My young brain it just didn't. It had a hard time processing that crap. You know.
Yeah. No, it's true. And then there was another one of my cooks. We'll just call him Dave.
Sure.
Boy, this guy was full of stories, man.
I liked Dave, but
as a person, I really got along with Dave. I really did. Yeah. He was really charismatic. He was funny. He was smart. He was sharp.
The Texan.
He was lazy as shit. That guy wouldn't work to save his life, man.
Right.
I don't know how many times I wrote him up for that, but he was just unstable. I think he was just mentally. I think, and it got worse and worse as he stayed down there because he started really, really getting into like mega hardcore rock and roll, like Sepultura was his band.
Yeah.
Sepultura, man. He loved those guys. And it was just like screaming full blast into a microphone type stuff.
Yeah.
And so he was really, really intense. He would write poetry. I don't know if you know this part, but he used to write poetry.
Yeah, dark poetry.
Yeah, and try to get published and stuff. And he would bring me these poems, and I'd be like, God dang, man, this is some crazy, weird shit. I can't even remember any of it. I just blocked it out and scarred me. But I think one of Tony and I's favorite stories about our friend Dave is he was turning 18. And
21.
Was he turning to 21? Okay, yeah. So that's right. Yeah, he was turning 21, and he was he.
Let me interject real quick. Okay, just real quick, because Dave has an arc, right?
Okay, yeah, he does.
And I think probably the thing with Dave is, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit more, but just to kind of like set it up, Dave. You mentioned how he kind of spiraled. I just think he was the prototypical. He didn't grow up in a small town. I knew he grew up in Texas, so, won't say too much, but it wasn't a small town. But it just suddenly, like, he was a bird out of the nest, right?
Yeah.
And so things started to spiral, right? And I will tell you right now, he was one of our CDAR clients.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of get to that too. But
he went off the hook fast.
Yeah, he did. But we just kind of watched, and I like Dave.
Yeah, so do I. It was great. I really did like hanging out with Dave.
But we just watched. But and also in the previous podcast I mentioned, we didn't indulge, me and you, in a lot of the Key West lifestyle. No. We just kind of watched things from a distance, and we're like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Dave is that holy crap. He's one of those crap guys. Oh, so anyway, 21. Oh my God, I just cliffhangered you, which isn't technically a word, but I did it anyway. Yeah, I'm a jerk, but we're right at an hour, and you and I both have better things to do. So if you want to see what happens to Dave, and honestly, it's pretty interesting, you'll have to wait until next week. Thanks again for listening. This has been an Analog Spectrum production and presentation. As always, it means a ton to both me and Doug that you took time to listen to our show. We enjoy making these things, but we get a massive kick out of knowing we have a few friends hearing what we have to say. This is about the 4th outro I've done, so let's keep it short. Please subscribe, share, and if you like what you're hearing, give us a top-notch 5-star review. Finally, feel free to email us, Facebook message us, or tweet at us. We love feedback and criticism, as long as it's constructive, and we're always interested in new show ideas. Well, that's all I have for now. The shows will keep coming, I promise you that. Thanks again for hanging out with me and all of us at Analog Spectrum. We'll see you again soon.